HBO buried a Game of Thrones prequel that would have changed everything, and the reason they killed it is something they never wanted you to know. It was called Bloodmoon. It was set 8,000 years before Daenerys ever raised a dragon. HBO shot the entire pilot. Then, without warning, they erased it and told the world almost nothing. But the real reason wasn't the one they gave you. It wasn't about quality. It wasn't about the script. It was about a decision made in a boardroom months earlier that made Bloodmoon a threat the moment it succeeded, not if it failed. In 2018, with Game of Thrones barreling toward its final season, HBO wasn't thinking about one successor. They were thinking about an empire. Executives greenlit not one, but multiple prequel pitches simultaneously, a rare and expensive gamble even for a network flush with subscriber cash. Among them, a show set during the Age of Heroes, thousands of years before Westeros as fans knew it, chronicling the birth of White Walkers and the fall of a forgotten civilization. It was mythic. It was ambitious. And HBO handed the reins to Jane Goldman, the acclaimed writer behind Kingsman and X-Men, First Class, alongside George R.R. Martin himself. This wasn't a vanity project. This was the next dynasty. By late 2018, Bloodmoon wasn't a pitch deck anymore. It was a fully produced pilot, shot on location in Belfast in Northern Ireland with a budget reportedly north of $30 million. Naomi Watts led the cast as Lady Alyssa Farman, a fierce noblewoman navigating a brutal ice-choked world. HBO scheduled test screenings. Insiders who saw early footage called it haunting, atmospheric, unlike anything the original series had done. Casey Bloys, HBO's programming chief, spoke about it publicly with real enthusiasm. Trade press treated it as the presumptive heir. A premiere date felt inevitable. Then, on October 30th, 2019, with almost no warning, HBO announced it would not be moving forward. No reshoots, no retooling, just gone. The official statement cited creative differences and a desire not to rush the next chapter. That explanation was technically true. It was also almost entirely beside the point. Remember that signed pilot, the $30 million the cast already assembled? Here's where it actually died, and it wasn't in a screening room. While Bloodmoon was quietly filming in Belfast, another prequel was developing in parallel, almost unnoticed. A show about House Targaryen, roughly 200 years before the original series, built directly from Martin's own book, Fire and Blood. It had a built-in audience already primed to crave dragons, and crucially, it required no new mythology lesson, no explaining White Walkers from scratch to a mainstream audience that just wanted more of what it already loved. Here's the part they buried. Bloodmoon wasn't killed because it tested badly or because Naomi Watts underperformed. Internally, according to multiple entertainment trade sources, the pilot was seen as genuinely strong, atmospheric, ambitious, exactly the kind of prestige swing HBO wanted its name attached to. It was killed because it was too different, too soon, at the exact moment HBO's data was screaming the opposite lesson. Executives were watching Game of Thrones' final season implode in real time, fans furious over pacing, over a rushed ending, over unmet promises. HBO's leadership grew terrified of asking that same bruised audience to immediately embrace an unrecognizable new world, thousands of years removed, with none of the familiar names. Meanwhile, the Targaryen pitch offered something Bloodmoon couldn't: dragons, familiar houses, and a built-in fanbase desperate for comfort, not reinvention. It wasn't a failure that killed Bloodmoon. It was a competing bet that looked safer on a spreadsheet. Bloys chose the show that wouldn't ask audiences to trust something new. He chose House of the Dragon. $30 million, a completed pilot, and George R.R. Martin's most experimental Westeros idea were shelved in favor of nostalgia that could be greenlit with confidence. Think about what that erased. A Game of Thrones prequel that dared to leave dragons and familiar sigils behind entirely, that treated the White Walker's origin as tragedy instead of spectacle, that gave Naomi Watts a role to define a new era the way Emilia Clarke once did. Instead, the franchise chose the safer, more marketable path. And while House of the Dragon has thrived, an entire mythic corner of Westeros, and the actors who brought it to life vanished from the timeline HBO ultimately chose to tell. So the next time HBO announces a new Westeros story, ask yourself, is it the boldest idea they had, or just the one that tested safest? And if a $30 million pilot can disappear this quietly, what does that tell you about the buried project Netflix doesn't want you asking about next?